This means
I'm so sorry.
Good thing. I was raised Catholic, very Catholic on paper. Both of my parents attended Catholic school all the way through graduate school. They were married at St. Matthew's Cathedral in Washington, D.C. in August of 1964, before Vatican II. When Mass was still in Latin, services were largely inaccessible to congregants, and women and men covered their heads.
No, men didn't cover their heads.
It was a
Can
very,
everybody, excuse me, can you mute online, please? Thank you.
It was a very different Catholic world than the one many people imagine today. Despite that deep institutional Catholicism, my parents weren't especially interested in attending Mass regularly or being part of a church community beyond their children's education. I, on the other hand, was always drawn to religion. I went to Catholic school all the way through high school, and unlike my parents, I loved attending Mass. I loved the choreography of it, the music, the quiet time to reflect, and, if I'm being honest, the fact that I got to sit with my best friend. I could hear the church bells from my parents' house and would walk the 15 minutes to church most weekends. I loved the rhythm of the service, the ritual, the sense of being part of something larger than myself. I paid attention. I participated. And in my senior year at my all-girls Sacred Heart School, I received the Faith Award, which, at the time, felt like a confirmation that my spiritual longing was an essential part of who I was. But then I went to college. For the first time, I was in a fully secular academic environment, and I was learning to ask questions, real ones. And I was also coming to terms with the parts of my life that didn't fit neatly into the framework of I had inherited. The moment that made this an unavoidable came when my grandmother passed away, a longtime Baltimorean. My grandmother died on a weekend, and a few days later, on the following Wednesday night, I attended a weekday Mass held in a multi-purpose space in one of our dorms on campus. I was in my 5th year of college, my scholar year, my final year before moving back home. I remember sitting on the floor, listening to the service and homily, surrounded by other students, and realizing something that surprised me. This place no longer brought me comfort. As I listened, I became aware of how much had shifted for me. This expression of faith hadn't supported my parents through their divorce. It didn't embrace my father as a gay man, and it no longer aligned with my beliefs about women, women's health, and reproductive autonomy. What struck me wasn't anger, it was grief. Because I wasn't rejecting faith, I was losing a home. That year, I started wandering, not dramatically, quietly. I attended services and programs through my college's interfaith chapel. I sat in spaces that belonged to many traditions. I listened more than I spoke. And around the same time, I was deepening a friendship with somebody many of you know, my husband, Brian. We met during the orientation of my first week of college. We lived on the same dorm floor. We sang together. We worked in the same building. We moved through the same social circles. And for years, we were just there in each other's lives. We both knew something important early on. Brian was Jewish, and he wanted to marry someone Jewish. And I was Catholic. So we stayed friends, good friends. We both participated in the Take 5 Scholar Year at the University of Rochester, and during that time, our friendship deepened. We spent a lot of time together, even while we were both dating other people. After graduation, when we both moved back to Maryland, something shifted. I realized I was in love with him, and I was already searching for a new spiritual home. I told Brian that exploring Judaism felt like an important part of getting to know him more deeply. And at that time, I wasn't planning on converting. I didn't have a plan at all. I just knew I wanted to understand. My future mother-in-law invited me to a Friday night service at the synagogue where Brian grew up. She kept leaning over to whisper explanations. And I remember thinking how strange it was that people were talking during services. Because at Catholic masses, that simply doesn't happen. And I actually had to resist the urge to shush her for interrupting. But what stayed with me wasn't the talking, it was the feeling of being invited in. Brian and his family didn't treat me like a guest who needed to prove something. They welcomed me into their Jewish life, into Shabbat dinners, holidays, conversations, and home practices without pressure or expectation. Around the same time, I found a book in the library written for Jews who were creating their own Jewish life, especially those who hadn't grown up with a strong Jewish home practice. And as I read it, something clicked. Judaism wasn't something that you did for 1 hour a week. It was something that you lived. It shaped how you ate, how you rested, how you treated people, how you moved through the world. I didn't want a religion centered on avoiding sin. I wanted a guidepost for becoming a good human being, a mensch. And slowly, without drama, I fell in love with Judaism. I kept kosher years before I converted. I attended services and family dinners and holidays. I learned how to pronounce the hardest names in the Haggadah because Brian's family loved saving those for the non-Jews and new Jews at the table. Judaism began to feel like home. After 2 or 3 years, I decided to pursue conversion. I converted under Rabbi Jack Moline at Agudas Achim in Alexandria in 2007. The process was intense, deeply meaningful, and also exhausting. I was at the synagogue 4 or 5 days a week, studying Hebrew, taking classes, learning from the cantor, attending services. What surprised me most wasn't the rigor, it was the embrace. Even when I couldn't fully participate, I was encouraged to show up, to belong, to feel like a member of the community. These people who became friends invited us to Shabbat dinners, included us at their Kiddush table, and offered us rides home when the weather was too bad to walk. What was harder were the questions from outside the Jewish world. Some people saw my choice as a rejection of Jesus, of family, of tradition. Some friendships faded. I lost closeness with one of my brothers, and letting go of tradition around Christian holidays was more emotionally complicated than I had expected. Change always costs something, but what I gained was transformative. Judaism gave me a moral compass rooted in action. It taught me the radical importance of rest, Shabbat, which remains my greatest learning edge. It gave me meaning to ordinary choices. It gave me community, a chosen family. Continuity didn't disappear, it relocated. One of the most important lessons Judaism taught me is that becoming Jewish isn't the end of the journey, it's the beginning. Judaism doesn't promise completion, it promises learning. As a perfectionist, that was hard for me. I wanted to know everything. And as a former Catholic, I had been taught that each parable and belief had one right answer. Judaism taught me something very different. That questioning isn't a failure, it's a value. Embracing curiosity has been one of the greatest joys of my Jewish life. That lesson has followed me through every stage of Jewish life: parenting, leadership, professional work, especially now in a post-October 7th world. Choosing to show up visibly as a Jew and as a Jewish professional feels deeply intentional. Judaism isn't something I chose once, I choose it every day. At some point, my personal journey quietly became a communal work. The first hint came shortly after my conversion. After I converted, my mother-in-law threw me a party. I was a soon-to-be married 20-something, and she gave me what she called a new Jew box. Inside it was mismatched Hanukkah candles, a bag of kippot of simpas I did not know, a year supply of Shabbat candles, a challah cover, and the largest bottle of Manischewitz I had ever seen. It was funny, and it was holy. Not long after that, I remember my rabbi gathering a group of young adults who had been showing up consistently. He invited us out to a happy hour at a fun restaurant known for its fried pickles and local microbrews. Our congregation didn't yet have something like Bayit, but he recognized something special happening. He wanted us to know that we were the future leaders of this community. Until then, I had always seen myself as a follower, someone who didn't grow up Jewish and didn't know enough. But then I was asked to lead young family services, to sing in the band, to participate, to step forward. After the pandemic began, I realized that what I missed more than anything was being in community, and especially in Jewish community. At the time, the past president of our small Reform synagogue in Haverford Grace, Maryland, invited me to become the social chair and to help create monthly events at the synagogue. Over time, that role evolved to include leading children's services and monthly singing groups for young families. When my children decided to stop homeschooling during that same period, I began looking for a new career path. I realized I wanted to translate that volunteer work I loved into a professional one. And in a way that still feels like a little miraculous, the stars aligned and brought me here to Beth Am. That experience taught me something I carry with me to this day. Belonging isn't created through expertise, it's created through invitation. That understanding shapes my work today at Beth Am and with the Newish Jewish Baltimore program. For those of you who may be unfamiliar, Newish Jewish Baltimore is the name of Beth Am's conversion and exploration program. From the time I interviewed at Beth Am, Rob Daniel recognized the value of collaborating with someone who brings lived experience as a Jew by choice to this work. Together, we saw the opportunity to craft experiences for conversion candidates that are not only educational, but relational. My instinct was to create space for candidates to get to know one another and to rely on each other, a space where questioning is encouraged and learning how to live a Jewish life happens together, not in isolation. In doing this work, I often find myself reflecting on my own Jewish life and on the moments that most meaningfully shaped my sense of belonging. My hope is to offer candidates the time, space, and support to create their own uniquely Jewish lives. People exploring Judaism often feel alone, unsure, overwhelmed, and afraid of doing something wrong. Almost everyone encounters speed bumps that makes taking that final step feel daunting. Sometimes the speed bumps is learning how to kosher a kitchen. Sometimes it's navigating family dynamics or helping loved ones understand the choice. Often, it's a mix of many things. My role isn't to push anyone forward. It's to listen, to hold space, to help build bridges to community, to practices, and to belonging. Helping others embrace tradition in modern life means honoring that Judaism looks different at different stages of life. Traditions evolve, practices adapt, and continuity does not require rigidity. Judaism hasn't resolved the tension between change and continuity for me. It has taught me how to live inside it. Whether we come to Judaism by birth or by choice, we are bound by the same ongoing work: learning, questioning, belonging, and choosing again and again. And that, to me, is the heart of Jewish life.
Wow.
I'm happy to answer questions.
I just want to say how welcome it is to have an inside view, a personal view, and a view that has been through so many of the complexities, family, emotional, intellectual, and institutional that Susannah, you shared with us. Can we, now we'll take off the gloves and I feel like there's a tenderness about this. So, but I also welcome this moment to look inside the heart of one of our community, and I appreciate her being here for that. So you'll take the question.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to answer some. Yes, Chad.
If the box that you got when you transitioned was holy, then why do we still have all of the kippahs? Why didn't they fall out?
But
You're very funny. That really was such a wonderful experience. It's also probably the one Brian and I tell the most frequently, because she wanted me to have all of the quirky things that you can't buy. You can't buy a box of candles, but we all have them, right? And the longer I've lived Jewish, the longer I appreciate how fun that was. Yes.
So I take it that maybe you haven't cut all your ties to all of your former Christian life, particularly family members. So do you go back for those important Christian events like holidays, and how do you feel when you're sitting there? Are you able to enjoy it, or do you feel like you're being disloyal, or that you're being tolerant, or what's the emotion that goes through your mind?
Can you repeat
sure.
just in case?
Yeah, sure. So in case you didn't hear the question, I haven't cut ties with my family, and how do I show up at holidays and family occasions, and how does that feel? So I actually feel really lucky that my husband's father also converted. And so I was welcomed into a family that already had lived this experience. And so I asked a lot of questions, and if you know me, that's not surprising. And what I really have expressed to my children who also participate in holidays is that just like we would invite people to our Seder or to Shabbat dinner, and they would be participating in our holiday, we go to their home and we participate in our holiday. So they don't give us Christmas presents generally. Sometimes for the kids they did when they were little, and more often we give them gifts, and just like they will come to our Hanukkah events and give us Hanukkah presents. I think it's been a few years. When it first started, it was a little more awkward to try and find how it was going to feel, but I didn't feel the same connection to it that I did while I was practicing. And so it was sort of a natural way to stay connected to my family and to let them know I supported them and I wasn't rejecting them, and still be able to be present in their life when those places show up. And I think over the years, my family didn't feel the need to have us there the same way they did before, because we were still so connected in other ways that it didn't become as big a part, but it was like a way to gradually let go of that participation, and that we were always welcome, and we almost always showed up when we were in the Yeah.
So my dad was Catholic. He passed. His mom had converted from some type of Protestantism to become Catholic. So the Irish Catholics in my family sort of won for a few generations, and then the Jews came in and did that. But one thing that's interesting that people have made their choices. My son's interacting with a lot of his non-Jewish friends, and apparently this came up in the schoolyard the other day about that he said Jesus was Jewish. His friends didn't believe him. So he's sort of the Jewish kid among his friends who can now, because he's here, like educate them a bit. Do you find a position, is there curiosity among your Christian family members about, the foundation of Christianity as Judaism, and have you been able to be an educator in that context?
Yeah, for sure. So the question was, as a person who is now Jewish, do I show up as the Jewish person who sort of explains things to my family and friends? And it's certainly true. And I found actually after October 7th, it's been even more that people feel safer calling me and asking me questions and explaining those things. And I also feel really lucky that I grew up in a community and my parents really valued us being around people of all different faiths and backgrounds. My dad's a professor at the University of Maryland, and So, my godparents were from Spain and from Poland and Germany. It was my brother, I have a twin brother. So we had quite a range of exposure, but I think that there are a lot of people who don't feel safe asking questions or afraid of being seen as not worldly or knowledgeable, and also they're afraid of being perceived as not being accepting of those things. I think the hardest conversation that I've ever had to go through has been from close friends from high school who saw me as this particularly, I don't know if devout Catholic is the way to think of it, but sort of, and that they couldn't imagine that in all of that time, I never felt particularly comfortable with things like the trilogy or praying to Jesus or thinking he was a God, like part of God. I don't know, just too far-fetched for me even at that point. And that it wasn't me choosing to reject something, that I was trying to search for something that felt more authentic and more truly myself. And I think part of that is like in the dogma of Christianity and Catholicism, that it does feel like a rejection, but that has been like the hardest wrestle for me. But I also feel really lucky that I am somebody who people feel safe enough coming to ask those questions for. Every once in a while there's like an internal eye roll because I get the same questions over and over again, but I try to be as welcoming to those things. And it is something that I hope I've kind of modeled for my kids, because they do go to a school where there are a few Jews, but they're not a lot, and they sometimes have to advocate for themselves that they're having the winter sleepover on the last night of Hanukkah and they want to be able to light candles, or that they're having a party during Passover and they wanted to know if they could bring stuff that they could eat and their friends could eat too, and things like that. So.
I love this, your description of your journey is one of a process, and obviously a person, but also a process.
Mm-hmm.
Was there, I feel about this when, I lived in England and I was around Jews all the time, and then I became English, and there was a moment once, after I got my citizenship, that I recognized that I was English. It's when I went to an event where I saw Spitfires flying, and I felt the pride and the Spitfire and the World War II thing. That was so English. That felt it to me.
Yeah.
Did you have a moment where you felt that, or was it a kind of gradual thing, and whether you came to a place where you felt, I'm here, or is it always a journey? That's the question.
That's a really good question. So, the question is, where in my journey did I feel, was there a moment where I felt like I'm Jewish now, or was it a gradual one? I would definitely say it was much more gradual. I also, it's so fascinating now that I'm involved in this conversion process to watch how many different places the conversion starts. I was living as a Jew for multiple years, other than I hadn't started any formal training. I kept kosher, I went to Shabbat, I celebrated all the holidays, I took them off from work, all of these things ahead of time. And my pursuing, taking the one-on-one class and meeting with my rabbi and all that sort of was like the capstone to it, where some other people, that's where they start. Mm-hmm. And the process is quite intense, as I mentioned before, and totally fascinating. And it was very funny because there was a point where I was meeting with our rabbi and he said, "Do you feel like you're Jewish?" And I think I remember like in that moment thinking, oh, yeah, like, yeah, sure. That was sort of the moment. He was waiting for that kind of aha moment where you're like, yes, I feel that way. But I don't remember thinking there was like one particular event where I like went to Kol Nidre and they opened the Ark and I was like, I'm a Jew. I will say that when I went to the Beit Din, that was probably one of the most emotional moments of my life. And I blubber ugly cried the entire time. And it was not because I was probably very nervous, but I just was like, so overwhelmed by like, I'm finally here, I'm finally, like it is official. And it was, I mean, when they opened the ark and you have to say the Shema in front of the ark, and I was just like, woo! It was such a moving moment, and it was really interesting because we went to lunch afterwards, and my father-in-law, my future father-in-law at the time, came with me, and he never had that. I think for him, he loved Judaism, but it was sort of a step in the process of marrying his wife, and he still loves like being counted as the 10th person and loves to light Hanukkah candles and things like that, but it didn't have that same like deep meaning that I felt when it happened, and it was really an interesting thing to watch him respond to how emotional I felt, which was a really neat moment.
I was wondering, since you, as a younger woman, had a beautiful experience of the sort of the majesty of the Catholic Church and the rhythm in your life and the family and community, do you think that had there been a thread in Catholicism or Christianity that really promoted questioning, learning, pill pull kind of stuff we do, could that have held you in? Is that the element that attracted you at some level to Judaism? Besides your husband.
That's a good question. So the question was if there had been more of a place for questioning and exploration in Catholicism, would I had stayed and not pursued conversion? I don't think that was ultimately the first feeling I had. I think in that moment, right after my grandmother had passed away, my parents had gone through a pretty awful divorce. My dad had come out as gay while I was quite young in the 80s, at a time where people were losing their jobs and having their houses burned down because they were coming out of the closet. And my parents were, again, raised Catholic, and when they sought help, they were told, you need two parents to raise your children, and it's best for them, and so you should do all these things. And at that time, my dad was certainly not sharing his, I don't think, his personal sexuality with the church. But I remembered sitting there thinking, and I don't even remember truthfully what the priest was talking about, but I just felt like there were these like key parts of my life that couldn't be embraced and accepted and helped through in a actual helpful way. And I couldn't imagine trying to raise a child to go through that experience in the same place. I couldn't figure out. I was also taking a fascinating class. I'd taken several in reproductive technologies, and it just felt so much to be in a place where I was sure that the church was never going to move forward in those things. I'm also, if anyone talks to me about even Judaism and why I see myself as a conservative Jew, is that the egalitarian aspect of it was too important for me. There will never be, I can't imagine in my lifetime, female priests and things like that. It just was too much for me to like overcome in that moment. And at first I just thought, well, I'll find a different form of Christianity that'll be more embracing of that. And it still didn't feel right. And I think in that process is where I really learned to start asking questions, because I had for so long, when you attend the Catholic school, probably even any school, you learn everything from a specific lens. And it's interesting to even talk to some of my friends who've gone to day school, that there is this moment where you sort of come out of that bubble and have to like learn all of the things. And not that it is a reason not to do that schooling. I think it's monumentally valuable. I loved my experience. But I think that was part of that process, was like learning that I didn't have to just take what people told me as the thing I had to believe, and that I could question and form my own opinions. So I hope one day they might become more flexible. Every pope seems to get a little more
there were so many like one-line things that you said that were so beautiful. And what really stands out to me is what you said about belonging comes from invitation. And so because I know you're working really directly with the Newish Jewish folks,
Yeah.
and even just people on Shabbat service who are coming to visit, and when the rabbi asks, "Is anyone new here?" What can we do as congregants when we're seated or next to or chat with someone who's Newish Jewish or someone who's just visiting, checking us out? What kinds of things can we do or say to invite that belonging?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's lots of things. I can think of moments where I've been at Shul and I see a new person come in, and sometimes you can tell that might be their first time in the synagogue ever. And they're looking at the kippot and the talit, and they're not sure if they're supposed to put them on, and how do you hold the prayer books, because your instinct is to hold it so you read it this way and not this way. And you can kind of see their curiosity. And so sometimes I'll plant myself sort of near them, and I might start by just like showing the page number occasionally when they look like they're flipping and trying to follow along. And if there's a moment, I've come a long way, I might lean over and like whisper something to them, like, do you need some help? Are you new here? Most people will find that really an easy way to feel like they can share, and you'd be surprised how often people will just like let it all out at that moment. But also just, when you're standing in the Kiddush line and people don't know where to sit because they don't know who they're safe, people are like inviting them to come. And I think that's something I really admire about them. I will say, we shul shopped for a while before when we moved back to Maryland. Brian grew up in Annapolis, so we were not familiar with the Baltimore scene really. And not everybody, I think everyone thinks they're warm and welcoming. And I think that there are very few places which really embody that. And I think Beth Am has done that very intentionally. And I'm really grateful to be a part of that. And I think being able to just lean over to a person you don't know, and they may be a longtime congregant who just hasn't been around for a while, and they're looking for that opportunity to come back. We get I do something called a 555 report, where I write a list of people that I feel like I haven't seen them in a while, or I want to make sure that they know about this really cool event that I know they like, or something like that. And one of the ones that I love the most is when I reach out to somebody and say, like, I just haven't seen you in a while, I want to check and make sure, are you okay? Is there anything you wanted? And we're having this thing that I know you used to love, and I want you to come. How often there is a story behind that, and how much that can be the break of that feel, because sometimes people do feel like, I haven't been here in a while and people are going to judge me. And really, I think most of us would agree, is the feeling is like, oh, I'm so glad you're here. I have been thinking about you, or I missed you, or how are you doing? And those moments of being seen and being welcomed back in is always important, whether they're really new or just haven't been here in a while.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I grew up very Reform, and I can say that a lot of ways that you're talking about your experience, I felt the same way. My friends were either conservative or Orthodox, and I loved that, but we were Reformed. And we sent Sam to a Hebrew academy. So he's but he went to Sunday school at the Reform synagogue. And, he felt some of that, speaking for him. But I always did. And I still feel embarrassed, like girls couldn't have a bat mitzvah. The boys, it was called a reading of the Torah, it wasn't called a bar mitzvah. I mean, we were really, really Reformed. Girls didn't have to learn Hebrew. All those things, I feel at a real loss, and now I feel like I'm too old to learn Hebrew, really.
Yeah.
And I feel like an outsider. It's nothing.
You're not too old.
Uh-oh, she said it out loud.
No, but I don't want to cut you off, but so many people. So Sheila was saying that you know, as a Reformed Jew and from a place where not everyone was encouraged to learn Hebrew and participate or have a bat mitzvah or any of those types of things, that sometimes she feels like an outsider. And I just want to speak this very, very clearly. This is the thing I've been the most surprised about, and also how much it's similar to my experience as a new Jew, is that there are so many people who want to participate fully at a place like Beth Am, and especially here, and they think they can't because they think that they were raised not fully Jewish. But I want to say that Beth Am has so many people who are coming in now because of that, and because we make people feel safe in being able to like start new at whatever age and learn whatever it is. And last year we did an engagement survey. Many of you, I know, took the survey, but we really listened to all of those statements, and there were a lot of people who shared just that they really wanted to come to services, but they hadn't been in a service for, you know, decades, and they didn't know the choreography or what the prayers meant, and the Hebrew is a real obstacle, and how do I get involved? And so we created the Tefillah Bootcamp to try and make that a bridge to feeling more comfortable in that space. And I do agree. I know everyone will say like you're never too old, but I think that it's the hardest part is taking that step, because you feel, I've been there, where you feel like I don't, I'm not sure I belong in these spaces, but I think all of us would love for people to be in those spaces. And there are so many people in this room and not in this room who are really wonderful mentors who love to throw their arm around people who are trying to learn and help guide them through that. And if you're ever hopeful for finding someone like that, I'm happy to connect you. And also, if you just raise your hand, you'll find them flurry over to you. And that's truly just like built into the fabric of Beth Am. It's just really, I do feel like me getting this job was really an amazing stars aligning to get me here. And I love the work I do, so. Yeah.
So I grew up conservative in upstate New York, and when I moved to Maryland, I was at Beth Shalom for a while before they had their building, and then I went to a reconstruction synagogue for a while because it was convenient, and I liked a lot of things about it. But then I went back to Beth Shalom, and even though I knew some people, I didn't feel warm and welcome. And when I came here, when I started my job in October of 2024, I had Malia the first Saturday I was here. I felt comfortable enough to get up and start people dancing without asking permission, because the rabbi at Beth Shalom was out her head, like, okay. And I felt very warm and welcome from the beginning. And when Andy came here almost a year ago, he felt very warm and welcome the first Saturday he was here. So I definitely feel like Beth Am is a very warm and welcoming place. And even if you grew up conservative or this or that or whatever, when you come here, it just like, it feels like it really is home, and it's really a place that you want to be. And now, because of this amazing job I have, I come to synagogue every Saturday morning, which is something I never really did growing up. We would go, you know, occasionally. My dad grew up in uniform, my mom was conservative, so there was that, you know. But this is a wonderful place, and I'm so happy to be, we're so happy to be a part of this family.
Yeah, and I think Felicia was just sharing how welcome she felt when she started here, and how lovely it is to be a part of this now. And I think that is a common thread I see as well. It's just, I think when I said that, that your interaction and your participation in Judaism, and mine specifically, has definitely evolved at different parts of our lives. And I think, I don't know, there are bound to be more perfectionists out there besides me. But I think that sometimes the goal is to like be perfect at being whatever it is, but really it's just a different flow of how things happen. And you'll have times where you can participate in learning more than others, and you'll have times where your kashrut looks a little different than others. And it's just making those choices. Every time you make a choice is an opportunity to do something differently and more meaningfully. And when it feels right, you'll take that step. And I think it's just making the landing as soft as it can be when you choose that step.
I have just more of a comment than a question, which is to tell that I think the people that work at Beth Am feel exceptionally lucky to have Susannah as a coworker, and the congregation, I think, is exceptionally lucky to have someone who models this vulnerability, and then not only models it, but then uses it to serve other folks who maybe are feeling a little lonely, and give them a home. So that's my comment. You can comment if you agree.
This is really wonderful.
Thank you.
This is wonderful. I'm also struck by how Susannah sharing her story has opened up our own hearts to our own journeys, and also perhaps opened, and I hope, opened out to our congregants, our potential congregants, our community, and those among us who may not understand where we're coming from. So thank you, Susannah.
Thank you, Susannah. I'm on.
We have a request from Anna Khan, who's saying we're excited for her father. And if there are 10 of us who could stay, this is part of the religious observation in St. Cottage with her.
And it's my conversion, because I was raised Orthodox. So if any women are gonna be counted, that's a whole new thing for me.
Okay, do you want to read it? Do you want to come here? Or you want
I don't want to read it.
Okay.
I was raised Orthodox, remember? I'm not used to, is there a man that will, Brian? Will you be Kaddish home?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you want the Siddur? I was gonna act like I memorized it. So, not that anybody asked, but if you all could